Yo ho ho and a bottle of rum. I hope that you are doing well wherever you may be and whenever you might be. I actually am going to be continuing with the live reading format, at least through the end of Chapter 2, hopefully in Chapter 3, because a friend of mine also happened to pick up this book. I guess it was needling them in the back of their subconscious, just because I've been mentioning it on and off for so long. Although the reason they gave is that is the author's relation to the cause of rights for LGBTQ folk and what they lost. I did, over the course of the week, finally come to an understanding, I think, of Oscar O'Flaherty Wills Wilde's stance regarding the form and the feeling and all of that. So, just going to, but why not? Jesus, I recorded 3 minutes in and then lost my place and then started re-recording because of all of that. All right, then. Also, in the week since, I did finish reading Chapter 1, so this will be a rereading. Now that I know that where the conversation's going, I'm going to have my ideas more fully formed. All right. So, the whole idea here that he's trying to express, the main thought, because since this is all in one paragraph, although I've switched to a new format, and in the last one it was not, the main idea here is that the art is about the reader, not about the author, and that they're really just playing with these ideas of vice and virtue, and hence the art of the musician. A musician plays music, yes, but like the actual idea of what they're doing is arranging symbols and holding them together for comparison, like composing a chord or a particular arpeggio or a melody. It's holding different sounds in contrast, and I guess contrast is things that are different. Yeah, you know what I mean. No, that bothers me. I must know this word. Contrast versus... It only gives comparison. Perhaps my brain is trying to invent a word that English doesn't have yet. We'll do fine without it. All right. And then acting is all about the telling of the story. That would be the actual symbol that is being arranged via music. And hence why it's perilous for the viewer to be reading too much into the story, but also that's where one can learn and engage with the art. Like, I think that if you're not doing that, then you're really cheating yourself out of a profound experience. I mean, even if you're the way that... excuse me. Even if you're not, you are, the way Mr. Wilde puts it, an ugly soul. I mean, it's good to know those things about yourself and perhaps challenge them. I say that there's never something wrong with self-awareness itself. I say there's nothing wrong with awareness itself. I mean, even if all of the things that you're aware of are such a small part of the picture of the whole truth that it's misleading, I mean, it can at least form the border of the shape of the whole truth for one, and can cause conflict, which can then make things clearer for others in the idea that we're all the same person, or throughout that conflict, bring you to a broader understanding. I mean, the more you know, the more you know, the more you know, the more you know, until you know that all you know is nothing. You know? So, all of that together. Oh, and in terms of at the end there, about art not being useful, his idea is, rhetorically speaking, that it shouldn't be useful compared to other forms of writing. in terms of being a convincing piece. At least this is my understanding on it. Because obviously art has a lot of uses. For example, and surely he cannot deny this, not in the least because he's dead, but he cannot deny that one of the main uses of art is for the viewer, for the one engaging with the art, to have a better understanding of themselves. Or to be reflected, whether they understand it or not, they're reflected in the work. So specifically, to be a useful versus not useful work would be a work for the purpose of convincing. Another thing that I did in between here and there is I reviewed a lot of my old work, both writing and video, although mainly video because my writings are all over the place. I've made a lot of progress in my constitution over the last year. That's part of my movement. And I've realized that focusing it on art isn't necessarily the best idea. Better to take a more straightforward approach, and then the artists will come. And there's certainly no harm in targeting artists first. My idea about unifying humanity. Which I haven't gotten around to, in part because I'm seeing someone again romantically, and the amount of sacrifice that would entail for the people who are on the ground floor there. You can call me a coward if you want. I do. Anyhow, rhetorically convincing piece versus just creating a very moving story of arranging these different ideas. And now I have a clear understanding of his aesthetic position. My aesthetic position is completely opposite. I firmly believe that art is purely about the person composing the artistic piece. However, the only way to judge the merit of an artistic piece, I would say, is about how clearly the emotional aspect of the writer is conveyed. Like whether or not the writer feels the emotional aspect that they're choosing to convey. This method of externalizing the internal world, the self, it's at least something that they have conceived. And if you tell me, I'm an artist and I've created this piece here and I just threw it together, it looked fine to me. I think it was skillfully done. This is my work of art. I say, if you were not having in mind a particular emotion when you compose the piece, then it is not an art. Then I will say that it is a craft. Because I'd say that even something as simple as admiration for your own prowess in terms of a highly technical piece of art, or about wanting to show your particular admiration for a viewpoint, or wanting to create relation in that way by creating a highly technical piece of art. In both those cases, that is an emotional connection that you're trying to put out there. I do have a problem with my definition, though, in that drugs exist. And crafting a drug, you can have an idea of an emotional experience and have it be a highly skilled work of art, but according to my definition, to give somebody a potent, emotion-altering, perception-altering drug. So, I've talked to a couple of people, and I could probably just think about it longer. We'll see how it goes, about getting that final twist of my definition of art going. But that's the stance that I'm coming from. But, yes, art is all about externalizing the emotional viewpoint of the author, in my opinion. All right. Getting back to where we were. I hate how you talk about your married life. Conscience and cowardice are really the same things. Poor lady. Nope, already did that. Being natural is simply found it. Okay. I forget what we were talking about last week. I'm going to go back at that. I found my space. It's after not at all and before being natural is simply opposed. It's that paragraph. So we have gotten the reveal, the name of Dorian Gray. Okay, then. So, the idea that people have different gifts, and I think that we're going to get into more of that in today's reading, and that the more average and lower a person is, they're able to pass peacefully through life, while people with really outstanding features, be that beauty or intelligence, have more weight on them. And to that, I would say, to an extent, yes. But in terms of the weight of history, it's more about how much that we choose to take that on. And I'm not sure if I'm being presumptuous or not, but I mean we in the sense of those. I guess that is a presumption that I've made. For people with gifts, how much a person chooses to take on the weight of what their gifts provide. And then there's the other aspect of when it's something that you have been blessed with, that it is going to influence your life in smaller ways. Like a more beautiful person will, in all likelihood, be more sought after. A more intelligent person will become more dissatisfied in the short term. Huzzah for water. Okay, then. And did we get into the thing about poets putting too much of themselves into their work? I'd say that that's just them taking their idea of transmitting language very directly as artists to its conclusion. It's just about, how much are you going to put into the skill of the labor versus just saying something really shocking. Especially today when there are a lot more people making a lot more artwork of varying skill, that the shock value of the thing itself isn't going to make too big of a difference. Like, people are killed all of the time. People are killed in war all of the time. But it's very different to hear that a child has died to actually see a older brother trying to wake up their sibling who can't move or breathe or think anymore, and the limpless of their limp limbs without any strength, especially the freshly dead. I've witnessed that in the past year, and it struck me. Not in person, thank heavens. Though on the other hand, I wish that I could be there in person to help. It's in whatever way I can. I'm not sure that I'm the person with the best skill for it, but trying is worth something. I hope I wouldn't just turn into another hungry mouth to feed. Also about secrecy and about how things become more beautiful. And I think that we did have that level of discussion right before the video cut off. But to reiterate, just in case. Sorry, I have some indigestion. I had a really lovely lunch. About secrecy making things more beautiful and special, and at the end of it all, that secrecy is the one special thing you have, and I think it's Lord Henry, says that this is this thing that's holding their marriage together, is that they go their separate ways and they have all of their secrets, and then this happened, and that kind of exchange. And my response to that is, there's a lot of fun in that. That goes a lot to, I think, the last video that has art in the title that I made, about what happens at the end of chess. And no, there's also so much in quiet peace and beauty at the end of history. And I think that is not a bad thing. History can end, and it will end. It's just, is it going to end because... I guess I'm going to drop the poetics here. It's either going to end where we don't need it anymore because we don't need to take account of all of the rulers and the leaders and the conquered and the conquerors, or is it going to end because death has conquered us all? I mean, it's going to conquer us all either way, but in order to maximize goodness, we want the latter of the former of the two outcomes I described. All right, then. This is Basil Hallward speaking to Lord Henry. I don't know his last name offhand. I hate the way you talk about your married life, Harry, said Basil Hallward, strolling towards the door that led to the garden. I believe you are really a very good husband, but that you are thoroughly ashamed of your own virtues. You are an extraordinary fellow. You never say a moral thing, and you never do a wrong thing. Your cynicism is simply a pose. Being natural is simply a pose, and the most irritating pose I know, cried Lord Henry, laughing. The two young men went out into the garden together and ensconced themselves on a long bamboo seat that stood in the shade of a tall laurel bush. The sunlight slipped over the polished leaves. In the grass, white daisies were tremulous. After a pause, Lord Henry pulled out his watch. I'm afraid I must be going, Basil, he murmured. And before I go, I insist on your answering a question that I put to you some time ago. What is that? Said the painter, keeping his eyes fixed on the ground. You know quite well. I do not, Harry. Well, I will tell you what it is. I want you to explain to me why you won't exhibit Dorian Gray's picture. I want the real reason. I told you the real reason. No, you did not. You said that it was because there was too much of yourself in it. Now, that is childish. Harry, said Basil Hallward, looking him straight in the face, every portrait that is painted with feeling is a portrait of the artist, not of the sitter. The sitter is merely the accident, the occasion. It is not he who is revealed by the painter. It is rather the painter who, on the colored canvas, reveals himself. The reason I will not exhibit this picture is that I am afraid I have shown the secret of my own soul. Yeah, from this point onward, Basil more or less is describing things that align with my stance on art. And so, I'm very curious how Mr. Wilde is going to offer challenges to my perception, considering that he's written out something that more or less aligns with my stance here, and yet he still said what he did in the introduction. Lord Henry laughed. And what is that? He asked. I will tell you, said Hallward, but the expression of perplexity came over his face. I am all expectation, Basil. No, I am all expectation, Basil, continued his companion, glancing at him. Oh, there is really very little to tell, Harry, answered the painter. I am afraid you will hardly understand it. Perhaps you will hardly believe it. Lord Henry smiled, and, leaning down, plucked a pink-petaled daisy from the grass and examined it. I am quite sure I will understand it, he replied, gazing intently at the little golden white-feathered disk. And as for believing things, I can believe anything, provided that it is quite incredible. The wind shook some blossoms from the trees, and the heavy lilac blooms with their clustering stars moved to and fro in the languid air. A grasshopper began to chirrup by the wall, and a blue thread, and like a blue thread, a long, thin dragonfly floated past on its brown gauze wings. Lord Henry felt as if he could hear Basil Hallward's heart beating, and wondered what was coming. The story is simply this, said the painter after some time. 2 months ago, I went to a crush at Lady Brandon's. You know, we poor artists have to show ourselves in society from time to time, just to remind the public that we are not savages. With an evening coat and a white tie, as you told me once, anybody, even a stockbroker, can gain a reputation for being civilized. Well, after I had been in the room about 10 minutes, talking to huge overdressed dowagers and tedious academians, I suddenly became conscious that someone was looking at me. I turned halfway round and saw Dorian Gray for the first time. When our eyes met, I felt that I was growing pale. A curious sensation of terror came over me. I knew that I had come face to face with someone whose mere influence in my whose personality was so fascinating that, if I allowed it to do so, it would absorb my whole nature, my whole soul, my very art itself. I did not want any external influence in my life. You know yourself, Harry, how independent I am by nature. I have always been my own master, had at least always been so, till I met Dorian Gray. A reminder that during this conversation, Basil Hallward had been disappearing from the public eye for 6 months, and I'm going to increase the size of the text here. There's still gaps on the side of the page. It's fine. Then, but I don't know how to explain it to you, something seemed to tell me that I was on the verge of a terrible crisis in my life. I had a strange feeling that fate had in store for me exquisite joys and exquisite sorrows. I grew afraid and turned to quit the room. It was not conscience that made me do so. It was a sort of cowardice. I take no credit to myself for trying to escape. Conscience and cowardice are really the same things, Basil. Conscience is the trade name of the firm, that's all. I don't believe that, Harry, and I don't believe you do either. However, whatever was my motive, and it may have been pride, for I used to be very proud, I certainly struggled to the door. There, of course, I stumbled against Lady Brandon. "You're not going to run away so soon, Mr. Hallward?" she screamed out. You know her curiously shrill voice? Yes, she's a peacock in everything but beauty, which is a really sick burn. Peacocks are famously aggressive. Do I have the peacock clock up? No, that's the one that I donated. All right. I had a big spiritual revelation once thanks to pondering the peacock. Life is funny. All right. Pulling the daisy to bits with his long, nervous fingers. I could not get rid of her. She brought me up to royalties, people with stars and garters, and elderly ladies with gigantic tiaras and parrot noses. She spoke of me as her dearest friend. I had only met her once before, but she took it into her head to lionize me. I believe some picture of mine had made great success at the time, at least had been chattered about in the penny newspapers, which is the 19th century standard of immortality. Suddenly, I found myself face to face with the young man whose personality had so strangely stirred me. We were quite close, almost touching. Our eyes met again. It was reckless of me, but I asked Lady Brandon to introduce me to him. Perhaps it was not so reckless after all. It was simply inevitable. We would have spoken to each other without any introduction. I am sure of that. Dorian told me so afterwards. He, too, felt that we were destined to know each other. And how did Lady Brandon describe this wonderful young man? Asked his companion. I know she goes in for giving a rapid précis of all of her guests. I remember her bringing me up to a truculent of red-faced old gentleman, covered all over with orders and ribbons, hissing into my ear in a tragic whisper which must have been perfectly audible to everybody in the room, the most astounding details. I simply fled. I like to find out people for myself. But Lady Brandon treats her guests exactly as an auctioneer treats his goods. She either explains them entirely away, or tells everything about them except what one wants to know. Poor Lady Brandon! You are hard on her, Harry, said Hallward listlessly. My dear fellow, she tried to found a salon, and only succeeded in opening a restaurant. How could I admire her? But tell me, what did she say about Mr. Dorian Gray? There's a lot of similarity in how this conversation is constructed to how I present my thoughts, and I find that comedic. But also the whole idea of people being destined to meet and about where we are pulled. That indigestion, I tell you. It reminds me a heck of a lot of Berserk. Oh, it's on the bottom of my stack of books. I won't bother getting it now. But volume 12, where Fantasia opens up and all of that gorgeous artwork that was fated to be, and the whole idea of, from Berserk, that the need for an evil, the need for an antagonist in the world creates this fantasy situation, and that we're kind of wound in our own recursive conversation about good and evil. I think that that's going to play a role here. And also, just about my ideas for fate, yes, there is a likelihood to everything that will happen. And because of superposition, and because this is really fascinating, because of the way that the separation of light affects very low mass or zero mass objects versus objects with mass, we are going to be pulled in every possible direction, but in such a way that we ourselves can't see it as we are. I mean, there's the whole idea that there are various things that we are attached to and thus are a part of us, which do have no mass and thus can feel the entire diversity from one point to another to all points. That velocity doesn't necessarily have a direction. What I'm trying to say is that all things are fated, and that this is all more of a reason to hope for the impossible, because it's kind of fate that destiny be defied. And I am being, I'm allowing myself to be poetic and mysterious there just because it's easier for me to describe. Although it's something to smile at too, for me at least. All right. She said something like, "He's a charming boy. Poor dear mother and I absolutely inseparable. Quite forget what he does. Afraid he doesn't do anything. Oh, yes, he plays the piano. Or is it the violin, dear Mr. Gray?" Neither of us could help laughing, and we became friends at once. "Laughter is not at all a bad beginning for a friendship, and it is far the best ending for one," said the young lord, plucking another daisy. Hallward shook his head. "You don't understand what friendship is, Harry," he murmured, "or what enmity is, for that matter. You like everyone. That is to say, you are indifferent to everyone." "How horribly unjust of you," cried Lord Henry, tilting his hat back and looking up at the little clouds that, like ravelled skeins of glossy white silk, thank you for your patience, were drifting across the hollowed turquoise of the summer sky. "Yes, horribly unjust of you. I make a great difference between people. I choose my friends for their good looks, my acquaintances for their good characters, and my enemies for their good intellects. A man cannot be too careful in the choice of his enemies. I have not got one who is a fool. They are all men of some intellectual power, and consequently they all appreciate me. Is that very vain of me? I think it is rather vain." "I should think it was, Harry, but according to your category, I must merely be an acquaintance." "My dear old Basil, you are much more than an acquaintance." "And much less than a friend. A sort of brother, I suppose?" "Oh, brothers! I don't care for brothers. My elder brother won't die, and my younger brothers seem never to do anything else." "Harry!" exclaimed Hallward, frowning. "My dear fellow, I'm not quite serious, but I can't help detesting my relations. I suppose it comes from the fact that none of us can stand other people having the same faults as ourselves. I quite sympathize with the rage of the English democracy against what they call the vices of the upper orders. The masses feel that drunkenness, stupidity, and immorality should be their own special property, and that if any one of us makes an ass of himself, he is poaching on their preserves." When poor Southwark got into the divorce court, their indignation was quite magnificent, and yet I don't suppose that 10% of the proletariat live correctly. And, of course, there's the whole idea that, no, it's not that these people with power are behaving poorly, that in itself, it's that they have the power to make decisions about people's lives, and they're paying poorly. It's rail against the idea of meritocracy, or that we supposedly live in, according to certain people. I mean, it should be the exact opposite, and hopefully it is for some of the more educated, gifted folks, that realization that we are all coming from the same place and that we all make mistakes, and it's just some people have a lot in between them and the ground to fall back on. Wishing everyone well in that respect. And I don't necessarily disagree with Henry about how he chooses his friends and acquaintances. Well, no. I obviously choose both my friends and acquaintances for their good characters. But between the two, a friend that you see somebody for pleasure, an acquaintance, someone that you do business with, you want the people that you do business with to be of good character. And if you're just going to be having fun with somebody and not really getting to know them on a deep personal level, if that's what you consider a friend, and Basil would say Harry does not, then why not be with somebody that's beautiful? I mean, I'll say right now that I have a bias towards wanting to be around beautiful people. I'm not shy in admitting that. But a good character is preferred. And once again, so much of the time, a good character comes from a deeper understanding of one's situation and place and just the world at large. And even really awful people are just poorly educated, I would say. The problem coming if they are miseducated into thinking that they know better and not really being open to the idea of seeing other perspectives. And that's the idea of perhaps immorality and the consequences of immorality are good teachers, and hence why it's good to make sure we live in such a world where those consequences are, in fact, able to hit. And just to be clear here, I'm not talking about punishments. I'm talking about educational opportunities. I feel like for those who do end up in dire straits, that it should be a reformative rather than a purely miserable experience. Like people hit rock bottom, and there should be people there to point them in the right direction when they're finally at, okay, I'm in this position of high anxiety where like I'm feeling all of these emotions and I'm conscious of what brought me here. Where do I go next? The people who are very powerful never get to those places. Well, very rarely get to those places. And even then, like, I want my enemies to appreciate how formidable I am. I agree that is vanity, and I'm glad that he recognizes it. What was the other thing that he said about, I don't believe that you believe this? Conscience and cowardice are really the same things. And this is the opinion of Lord Henry. I see. In the idea that he said that conscience was not what made him escape, that he didn't want to change. Conscience, quite literally, is looking within. Science, to see, like recursive within. So, I disagree with Lord Henry once again. I've described myself as a coward here, and I think that to be a coward is to not have ignorance of what is right and wrong, and then make a less ideal decision. And there are levels to how much cowardice any particular action has. I think you have to go a long way to say that you're an outright coward. Like that whole idea that somebody who's particularly courageous is somebody who faces their fear. To be a coward, you have to face your fear and then run away anyway to make the wrong decision. And in that sense, to know that you're afraid of it and to know what the right thing is, that does take a lot of self-awareness and emotional awareness. So I agree with Harry that conscience contains that you have to be conscious, self-conscious in order to be a coward. No, I take that back, because if you can have the fear. No. You don't need to put all of these things together. There has to be a choice. In order to be a coward, there has to be a choice of, will I stay or will I go? Whether or not you recognize yourself as a coward after the fact is an entirely different matter. You may not recognize yourself as a coward, but you have to recognize that you're making the wrong choice. And so, is it possible to have a choice without conscience? I unconsciously allowed myself to take this pose, but I allowed for my body to move unconsciously in that moment. I allowed myself to have that moment of comfort, of just letting my body move as it wishes. I'm going to write that down and get back to you for chapter 2. How many thoughts, thank you for your patience, are under thoughts choices? The umbrella of conscience. Intuitively speaking, I think that there are many choices that one can make that one is not, that do not fall under the purview of conscience. But cowardice, I would say, is one of them. All right, after what Lord Henry said about the proletariat being angry at the rich for their impropriety or immorality, I don't agree with a single word that you have said, and what is more, Harry, I feel sure you don't either. Lord Henry stroked his pointed brown beard and tapped one toe of his patent leather boot with a tasseled ebony cane. How English you are, Basil. That is the second time you made that observation, that he doesn't feel what he says he feels. If one puts forward an idea to a true Englishman, always a rash thing to do, he never dreams of considering whether the idea is right or wrong. The only thing he considers of any importance is whether one believes it oneself. Now, the value of an idea has nothing whatsoever to do with the sincerity of the man who expresses it. Indeed, the probabilities are that the more insincere the man is, the more purely intellectual the idea will be. I think I disagree with the former and agree with the latter here. As in the case that it will not be colored by either his wants, his desires, or his prejudices. However, I don't propose to discuss politics, sociology, or metaphysics with you. I like persons better than principles, and I like persons with no principles better than anything else in the world. Tell me more about Mr. Dorian Gray. How often do you see him? I do not think that persons without principles exist. We have priorities, whether we are conscious of them, which is different from conscience. Whether we are conscious of our principles or not, we have principles that will reflect in our actions. And it could be that we value one thing more on a given day than another, and that the balance of our heart scales tip depending on the circumstances. But what exactly tips and how much a single weight tips a different person's scale? We have systems. We operate according to our systems. That's how it is. And he's not particularly discussing metaphysics here, but he also literally is talking about epistemology, which I'd say is very closely related. I guess it would be meta-epistemology. I don't think that that's the right term. Like, you can say that you can believe in something and not know whether it is right or wrong, but that's like the overarching idea of what is true and what is false on a real scale, and if that's even possible to know. In this case, it's this idea of sincerity, and that he wants to embody that as well as admiring it in others. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And once again, wants, desires, and prejudices, maybe with the exception of prejudices, people without principles will let more of themselves show, and thus they do have a ideology. So I disagree. He finishes off this kind of aside, because he doesn't like to discuss these things with Mr. Hallward, apparently, who's so judgmental and wants to know. I find myself, I kin him, to use modern speech. I kill. I kill. I made a promise to myself I'd be doing these once a week. I kin Mr. Hallward, in modern speak. Tell me more about Mr. Dorian Gray. How often do you see him? Every day. I couldn't be happy if I didn't see him every day. He is absolutely necessary to me. Although telling people that they don't believe what they say isn't right, I'd probably question. That doesn't seem like you. How extraordinary. I thought you would never care for anything but your art. He is all my art to me now, said the painter gravely. Sometimes I think, Harry, that there are only two eras of any importance in the world's history. The first is the appearance of a new medium for art, and the second is the appearance of a new personality for art also. What the invention of oil painting was to the Venetians, the face of Antinous to the late Greek sculpture, and the face of Dorian Gray will someday be to me. It is not merely that I paint from him, draw from him, sketch from him. Of course, I've done all of that, but he is much more to me than a model or a sitter. I won't tell you that I am dissatisfied with what I have done of him, or that his beauty is such that art cannot express it. There is nothing that art cannot express, and I know that the work that I have done since I met Dorian Gray is good work, the best of my life, but in some curious way, I wonder, will you understand me? His personality has suggested to me an entirely new manner in art, an entirely new mode of style. I see things differently. I think of them differently. I can now recreate life in a way that was hidden from me before. A dream in form of thought. A dream in form, days of thought. A dream of form in days of thought. Who is it that says that? I forget. But it is what Dorian Gray has been to me. The merely visible presence of this lad, for he seems to me a little more than a lad, though he really is over 20. His merely visible presence. I wonder, can you realize what all that means? Unconsciously, he defines for me the lines of a fresh school, a school that is to have in it all the passion of the romantic spirit, all the perfection of the spirit that is Greek, the harmony of soul and body. How much that is! We, in our madness, have separated the two, and have invented a realism that is vulgar, an ideality that is void. Harry, if only you knew what Dorian Gray is to me. You remember that landscape of mine, for which Agnew offered me a huge price, but which I would not part with? It is one of the best things I have ever done. And why is it so? Because, while I was painting it, Dorian Gray sat beside me. Some subtle influence passed from him to me, and for the first time in my life, in the plain woodland, I saw in the plain woodland the wonder I had always looked for and always missed. Something about reading this always tends to make me sick. I don't think that I'm particularly sick now, just tired and full from a good lunch. It's also a hot day, and I have to keep the air conditioner off for the purposes of sound quality. That's probably why you're able to hear birdsong in the background through the air conditioner. Basil, this is extraordinary. I must see Dorian Gray. Hallward got up from his seat and walked down to the garden. After some time he came back. Harry, he said, Dorian Gray is to me simply a motive in art. You might see nothing in him. I see everything in him. He is never more present in my work than when no image of him is there. He is a suggestion, as I have said, a new manner. I find in him the curves of certain lines and the loveliness and subtleties of certain colors. That is all. Then why won't you exhibit his portrait? Asked Lord Henry. Because, without intending it, I have put into it some expression of all this curious artistic idolatry, of which, of course, I have never cared to speak to him. He knows nothing about it. He shall never know anything about it. But the world might guess it, and I will not bare my soul to their shallow, prying eyes. My heart will never be put under their microscope. There is too much of myself in the thing, Harry. Too much of myself. Poets are not so scrupulous as you are. They know how useful passion is for publication. Nowadays, a broken heart will run to many editions. My darling and I, who I think I was seeing, no. I think that she and I were on a break, or we hadn't met when I last recorded. There we go. No. When I took the page out of full screen to help me see better, I lost my place, but I'm copying that so I can post it to her later. After a few writing projects, we're going to do another collaborative poetic work together, and I'm excited for that. I hate them for it. No, I hate them for it, cried Hallward. Something that I don't appreciate about this old Irish, at least I pray it's Irish, I hope it's not Scottish, and I was confused. I don't like about this style is that they give me the words that are said and then give me the speaking. Like I would have said that more disdainfully or sternly. I hate them for it. But no, cried Hallward. So it's, I hate them for it, cried Hallward. An artist should create beautiful things, but should put nothing of his own life into them. Hallward, this is where you lose me. You just said that everything beautiful is autobiographic of the artist, even though he didn't use those terms. Of course, if something is too autobiographic, then it becomes less skillful art according to my definition, but we live in an age when men treat art as if it were meant to be a form of autobiography. We have lost the abstract sense of beauty. Some day I will show the world what it is, and for that reason the world shall never see my portrait of Dorian Gray. I think you're wrong, Basil. I won't argue with you. It is only the intellectually lost who ever argue. He's throwing a burn at me now. Tell me, is Dorian Gray very fond of you? Yeah, this sounds like the kind of a love affair, it would seem. The painter considered for a few moments. He likes me, he said after a pause. I know he likes me. Of course, I flatter him dreadfully. I find strange pleasure in saying things to him that I know I shall be sorry for having said. As a rule, he is charming to me, and we sit in the